Hello, I'm Javier Hernandez, and welcome to Los Comics TV. Okay, we're going to look at this book today, Fantastic Firsts. I don't know if you can tell, but it's a hardcover book, and this is a slipcase. Ta-da! So, put this aside. Okay, so yeah, this book came out in 1994. It was part of I don't know how many they did. It was a Marvel Limited imprint from Marvel, and like I said, 94. I know I think there's at least one other book they put out. Maybe they put out 2 or 3 total. Maybe a few more. I haven't seen any of the other Marvel Limited books other than this other one I had seen. But anyway, for our purpose, we're just going to look at, well, the only one I have, Fantastic First. So it's a hardcover collection, literally reprinting the first issues of all their major characters, at least from the Silver Age, what they call the Marvel Age of Comics, starting with the Fantastic Four, and I'm sure you recognize all the others. So let's take a look at this. So what's in here is, pretty much, like I said, the main lineup of the classic comics, Fantastic Four, AntMan, Hulk, Submariner, or at least his return to the Silver Age, SpiderMan, Thor, Iron Man, Sgt Fury, Doctor Strange, the Avengers, the XMen, Captain America, which is actually his reintroduction into comics in the Silver Age, Daredevil, Shield, starring Nick Fury, and the Silver Surfer. So yeah, these are the actual individual credits. Per issue, the actual writer, penciler, the inker, the letterer, and the colorist, when they can identify them. They don't usually mention them in all the credits in the comics. We'll look at that. But when they put the book together, I guess whatever records they had, they try to look up the original artist and inkers and colors and letters. And I think some of these might have been recolored. Okay, but anyway, so there's an introduction here by Stan Lee, of course, who pretty much wrote the majority of these original books and created the ideas with the individual artists, which we'll get to in each chapter. I like this opening statement by Stan Lee. In those early days, we had absolutely no idea. We had no idea that the stories we were writing and drawing would turn out to be anything special. Which is true, They're cranking these books out starting in 61. And they were literally cranking them out, just kind of, trying to ride that superhero wave that I guess DC Comics had success with at the time. And it started coming out with one idea after another. So every chapter 1, Krakathum, has an introduction by a relevant creator. In this case, Tom DeFalco, who had written comics for Marvel. And definitely I think he wrote a lot of Fantastic Four. Probably the 80s, I imagine the 80s. I think he was an editor also at Marvel. So anyway, Fantastic Four #1 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, the one that started out that whole run of superheroes at Marvel in the 60s, because before that, for the longest time, they were doing just monster books. They did superheroes in the 40s, but then by the 50s and such, like a lot of publishers, they were doing comics on horrors and monsters and things like that. So it was time to get into the superhero genre. So in fact, in this first issue of Fantastic Four, the FF don't even wear costumes. There's the Thing with his gigantic blue trunks. The Human Torch, based on the original Human Torch from the 1940s at Marvel by Carl Burgos. So they decided to kind of retool that character and bring him back. And then, of course, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. So anyway, simple origin, at least for the 60s, right? They go up in outer space and they're hit by cosmic rays. They come back and bada bing, bada boom. They all got superpowers and become a super team. So that's the origin right there. And then the second part of that comic, they got to have a villain. So they fight the Mole Man. And there's this giant monster terrorizing the countryside. And FF is called to action. Sorry, I just got a little beep there on my messenger. So yeah, in this first issue, they Lee and Kirby start introducing the idea of Marvel superheroes, where they're, you know, ordinary people with extraordinary powers and super extraordinary adversaries in the shape of the Mole Man and his monsters. So that's the first of the superheroes. Chapter 2, it's the AntMan, and this is introduced by Larry Lieber, he's actually Stan Lee's brother, and he worked on a lot of Marvel stuff in the 60s, writing and also drawing. So the AntMan shows up first in Tales to Astonish 27, and like the FF, he has no costume. This is more like one of their typical stories at the time, just like these weird sci-fi horror, you know, almost sometimes Twilight Zone type stories. So here's a man, Hank Pym, who creates this shrinking serum, and then he ends up shrinking himself, and he ends up in the ant world. But of course, a few issues later, it's time to retool him, bring the same character back, throw him in a costume, and ta-da, we got Ant-Man. So again, looking at these stories, some of you who don't know of the original comics, you may have seen the Marvel movies. So maybe these characters will be familiar to you through that way, but they started here in the comics first. And back then, there was not even a thought of movies. They were the comic business. That's what they were here for. So, very inventive helmet. I love that, by Jack Kirby. Can't beat that helmet design. And this shows you how it works: the transmitter, the decoder, and all that, receiver. I'm going to skip through this. I want to skip through these quick because I got a whole book to go through. And Ant-Man controls ants, so yeah, have the ants attack your adversary and even clog up the gun. So after that, what do we got? The Hulk, introduced by Herb Trimpe, who's not the original artist, but Herb Trimpe had a very long run on a couple of runs on the Hulk. Like after Kirby left, Herb did I think a late 60s all through 70s, maybe even into the 80s, but definitely 60s and 70s was his era for the Hulk. So it's nice to hear his commentary on the character. But again, here's the Hulk, another one of these monster type characters, kind of moves over to the superhero side. Bruce Banner gets hit by a gamma bomb. Again, Kirby on the art chores. I mean, Kirby was the guy. Marvel is what it is. The Marvel superheroes are who they are because of Jack Kirby. You got the idea by the editor, writer Stan Lee in collaboration with the artist, but look, the Hulk, right? We all know him, this big, overly massive, muscled man monster. Here he is, kind of the old Wolfman story. The guy turns into the Hulk, Bruce Banner, now that he's been hit by gamma rays. Cosmic rays for the FF, gamma rays for the Hulk. So, I guess Stan's going in alphabetical order of the radiation available. Little bit of a Cold War aspect to this because there's like this spy. There's this Russian spy, of course, at the time trying to steal the atomic secrets. So there's a little bit of that stuff going on. I love that. Oh, they're talking about the Hulk and they think it was a big escaped gorilla, but I love that drawing. Or some people thought it was a giant bear in clothes, okay? But yeah, the inventiveness on these comics, and Kirby had been working around since the 40s. He was already a superstar, and he was doing a lot of these monster books in the 50s for Marvel, and he had done horror and romance and gangster, pretty much every genre, and he excelled in superheroes. So it makes sense to put him back in the driver's seat as far as the visual, artistic, creative end of this. Chapter epilogue by Herb Trimpe. Chapter 4 is bringing in the Submariner got introduced in the 4th issue of the Fantastic Four, and I think by the 3rd issue they got their costumes, so now they're like a full-fledged superhero group. Roy Thomas wrote the intro. He has a long association with Marvel, obviously, but also he's a big Bill Everett fan. Bill Everett created the Submariner, and he definitely had his stint writing the character. So yeah, it was the decision was made by Stan and Jack to bring the Submariner, from obscurity, because he hadn't been seen since the 50s at Marvel, into the Marvel Universe. Johnny Storm finds him. He's in the Bowery in New York. Um, I guess he's all upset. He's, again, he's keystone of the Marvel supers. They fight amongst themselves. So Johnny had another fight with Ben. He flew off and he was going to go hide out in the Bowery for a while, whatever. He finds a Submariner comic, and then these guys are saying, hey, there's this old bum here that looks like the Submariner or says the Submariner. And they're harassing him. He pushes the guys off. This is funny. This is a comic book, right? So Johnny's like, well, let's see. So he uses his flame power and he shaves him. I guess with fine touch, he can burn off the hairs without burning the guy. And then it's like, wow, it's the Submariner. So that's how he gets introduced into the modern comic at the time. I'm sure if they did it today, it'd be like a 10-issue miniseries. But this is much quicker and more fun, I guess. So Submariner gets back in the water, gets his strength and his memory back, and the FF got to stop him because Submariner's always often at war with the surface world. Here he summons up this, I think was his name, Giganto, this man whale or monstrous humanoid whale with arms and legs. So that's a great shot. They strap a hydrogen bomb to the thing's back, and he goes inside the whale's mouth. We've seen that before, right? And then you see like the ships that the whale has swallowed, and I guess there's all these little undersea monsters. Pretty wild stuff. I mean, I can imagine being a kid reading this stuff in the day, just like, wow, this is awesome, crazy stuff. And it looks like they included an extra story with the Submariner from Fantastic Four Annual #1. Again, Jack Kirby on art duties. This one is inked by Dick Ayers, another longtime Marvel classic guy. Yeah, I'm just going to skip through it because we already introduced the Submariner, but Submariner, I guess, was a hit. He showed up quite a bit in the Fantastic Four comics at the time, and then eventually got his own series back, or a new series. What do we got here? So yes, of course, Marvel's most famous character, most probably, right? SpiderMan. Introduced by John Romita, who didn't create Spider-Man, but did have a long run and an association with the character after Steve Ditko, the original artist, left. So yeah, I'm sure you've all seen the Spider-Man Amazing Fantasy 15 origin story. It's been talked about, infinitely, including by me, I'm sure, on previous episodes. But yeah, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko introduced right here would turn out to be probably the most popular Marvel super of all time. And at this point, for the world, probably one of the top 3 superheroes, maybe top 2. Definitely one of the most recognizable, iconic characters just all over the world. No small part to the fantastic box office success of the various films, but even before the first Spider-Man film with Tobey Maguire in 2002, I think it was. I mean, there was already animated series on Spider-Man, merchandising bonanza. I mean, the character just had such a huge appeal. So much of it, you got to credit to this first issue. The story and, of course, the fantastic costume. Very unique and slightly macabre and, maybe a little freaky looking at the time. And, the guy's face is completely covered. That was very rare in comics at the time, especially for a hero. But yeah, that's the magic of Steve Ditko's character design. And then, of course, the story with, Peter, the young nerd or, ostracized young man who just pretty much loves his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. And, because of him, Uncle Ben gets killed. So you got that whole guilt trip built in to the character from day one. So a lot of fantastic stuff going on so far. Then we got Thor by Joe Sinnott, a fantastic artist, really primarily inker, longtime inker on Marvel Comics. Very well known for inking so much of Jack Kirby's 60s and 70s stuff. So again, here's here's the bookmark. It's kind of a nice little thing there. What's fascinating about the Marvel characters, I mean, these early ones here, they're so distinct. Like their origins are so different. Even though like Fantastic Four and the Hulk and Spider-Man is radiation as the cause of their powers. I mean, the Fantastic Four, they want to be the first ones in space, so they get hit in space by the cosmic rays. The Hulk gets hit by a gamma bomb. accidentally. Well, here Thor, they're bringing mythology into the Marvel Universe, Norse mythology, where this Dr. Donald Blake is on vacation in, was it Norway or something? You know, I guess he's got a bad leg. He's got a cane, but he goes mountain climbing. Go figure. And he gets trapped in this cave, and he finds this. Oh, actually, he doesn't have. He doesn't have a cane. He loses his cane. He finds this wooden stick, and he goes, "Well, let me use it to move these boulders out of the way so I can get out of here." He strikes the cane. He strikes the stick on the boulder, and transforms into Thor. Whosoever holds the hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. So this gets revealed, I think, much later in the comics, why Thor was, in suspended animation, waiting for someone to come and pick up the stick. Someone has to be worthy. Anyway, now Thor takes over, and of course he can lift the rock as if it's cardboard. So again, it's a very different type of origin, and again, bringing like mythological characters into the Marvel comics was why we see it's a new thing, because it's the first time that's happened in the first 10 books so far. Yeah, Thor is a great character. I've always loved that costume. Primary colors, right? Very Superman, blue, yellow, and red, and the hammer and everything. Let's see, next chapter. Of course, Iron Man, the original Iron Man, appeared in Tales of Suspense 39, and yeah, the first time he showed up as Iron Man, he had this big, bulky gray armor. Which, if you've seen the movie, as you're looking at these comics here, it should ring familiar, the origin story. Tony Stark, millionaire inventor, weapons manufacturer, which I guess back in the 60s, you could have a character be a weapons manufacturer without everybody getting too angered. So he's in Vietnam. Yeah, this is taking place in the 60s, so he's in Vietnam. He gets captured by a, Vietnamese warlord, and they're forcing him to build weapons. But, he's a scientific genius, so he ends up, with the help of this other gentleman who's captured, another scientist, he ends up building this robot suit. And there it is. He lives, he walks, he conquers. The old man tries to get away, and I believe he gets shot down. They're trying, what's going on? So yeah, Tony Stark has now got this powerful suit of armor where he can escape his captors. And it's all powered by transistors, which are, I guess, back in the 60s, that was a revolutionary, scientific component in powering robot suits. I used to use them in my radios, but whatever. So yeah, again, a very different origin. No cosmic rays this time. It's an accident, and man just uses his scientific skills to create this cool suit of armor. Now we got a new superhero. And eventually the costume turned gold in the next couple of issues, and then Kirby left the story, or at least for the story, we got a new suit of armor. Steve Ditko designed that familiar red and gold suit that you're most likely familiar with Iron Man. Another comic, Sgt Fury, was a World War II story, World War II era story. Sgt Fury and his Howling Commandos. It was a war comic. So this was taking place in World War II, even though it's coming out in 65 or whatever, 64, 65. So it was just a standard, army war stories with Sgt Fury, which he'll show up again soon. Look what they do with Sgt Fury. Weapons of war. Pin up of the Howling Commandos. So yeah, there's the whole team of them. What do we get to? We get to Doctor Strange, who first showed up in Strange Tales 110. Wasn't a lot of fanfare because this was a comic featuring the Human Torch. No mention of Doctor Strange on the cover. But inside the issue, there was this, was a 5-page story on Doctor Strange. According to Stan Lee, at least what he said one time was, 'twas Steve's idea. Steve Ditko came up with this concept of this practitioner of black magic, but he's on the side of good. So this is one. It's not even an origin story. The first appearance, he's helping some man is having his horrible nightmares, and he's being haunted by these unseen figures. It's pretty spooky. And it turns out it's this character called Nightmare who rules the nightmare dimension, right? Not surprisingly. And Doctor Strange helps him using his eye of Agamotto and dispels Nightmare out of the man's life. And then a few issues later, they realize, well, we know what? We better do his origin story, the origin of Doctor Strange. Again, those of you who've seen the movie, you can just look at these images and you see that it'll be familiar to you. It's Dr. Stephen Strange, a famous surgeon, slightly arrogant, doesn't have time for charity work. He gets in a car accident and he finds out his hands are ruined. And so he will never be able to do surgery again. So now he's ruined. So he becomes this homeless transient drifting the world, trying to seek some cure for it. There's no medical cure for his hands, ironically, him being a brilliant surgeon. He hears rumors of this old master in Tibet, I think, or in the Far East somewhere, and the Ancient One. So he goes to visit him. This is right out of, the film is literally adapting this pretty verbatim. And there's another student there, Baron Mordo, who has evil intentions against the Ancient One, the Master. But Stephen Strange, ends up becoming the disciple of the Ancient One and learns the secrets of black magic. So very inventive use here. Dick, I'm rushing through this, I know. But I love this panel here where you're looking through the outside window. And Ditko would use that window design for Doctor Strange's New York base. Sanctum Sanctorum, I think they call it. What else here? So the Mighty Avengers. At this point, there was an Iron Man comic, a Thor comic, a Hulk comic. AntMan, I think, had his own comic. So they figured, hey, let's put them together as a group. The story is that they were trying to have something to compete against DC Comics Justice League at the time. But yeah, you already got these heroes are already ready made. So they come together because of this plot by Loki. Which again, that is pretty much how the first movie goes too. Jack Kirby, again, the artist, since he was already drawing most of these characters, actually all of them, right? So I'm just going to skip through this really quick. Again, they just team up to fight Loki and they stay as a team. It's a pretty neat idea to get these various characters and put them together in a comic. But I guess DC had done that already. So the same month that Jack Kirby's doing the art on Avengers 1, him and Stan Lee, they knock out XMen #1. X-Men needs no introduction, right? The famous team of mutants from Marvel went on to become super huge in the 70s when they kind of retooled them in the giant-size X-Men #1, and then throughout the 80s and 90s and such. In fact, Scott Lobdell wrote this intro, and I guess he was writing X-Men probably around when this book came out in, what did I say it was, 2004? I'm sorry. I thought we all looked at the date here. 94, yeah. Okay, we didn't need to look at that. So anyway, the X-Men, yeah, again. And so here's another team book, but these are all brand new characters, which we've never met before, unlike the Avengers. So in this one, same amount of pages, they need to introduce the team, kind of introduce each character. They don't really go through the characters' origins, but they're gathered by Professor Xavier, of course. I love these original costumes, by the way. Kind of like the Fantastic Four, where they have like a group look, group uniforms. That's what they have, except in Iceman's case, it's iced over. But I've always loved these dark blue or black, yellow costumes, and it really fits. It's like they're training costumes because they're all teenagers at the time, and they're in training. So I kind of like that they're designated in that way. They're not individual characters yet. In fact, they're pretty much just a team. But yeah, I love the color scheme on the costume and just the basicness of it, the trunks and the tights and the boots and such. Then the fifth member, Jean Grey, goes on to become Marvel Girl and then Phoenix and Dark Phoenix. She's got definitely a long history in the comic. They also introduced their first villain, Magneto. So yeah, there's a lot packed in this first issue. Again, the Avengers, Loki was already established in the Thor comic. Here, you're from scratch. You're bringing in creating a new character, Magneto, with all the heroes on the opposite end. So it'd be worth looking back at this comic later. But yeah, it's a tour de force, and of course they have the first adventure where they stop Magneto from, I forgot what he was doing, taking over the world or causing havoc with our nuclear missiles. Next chapter, Captain America. Captain America had been around since the 40s, created by Joe Simon, Jack Kirby. Kind of like with Submariner, they decided to, hey, let's bring Captain America back in from obscurity, because again, they brought him back in the 50s, and it kind of just died off, that comic. So they bring him back in Avengers #4. Yeah, there's our lineup, and then welcome Captain America. Ironically, Submariner is the one who kind of brings him back. And he was brought back himself in Fantastic Four. He finds his Eskimos are bowing to this figure in a block of ice. They think it's a god or something. So he breaks it open. He throws it in the ocean, and it ends up melting. And the Avengers happen to find him, and they realize it's Captain America. Of course, they remember him from the World War II era. So he basically shows up, and he's trying to get refamiliarize to the modern world right here by the mid 60s. So again, very similar to what you saw in the first Captain America film. So he joins up with them on a mission, and next thing you know, he's part of the Avengers, one of the most popular Avengers over the years. I mean, the Avengers usually change their lineup, but he's very often in the group. So yeah, there we are, the new lineup of the Avengers, and it's like they put another Captain America story in here, where this time Stan Lee with Jack Kirby retells the origin, keeps it the same from what it was in the 40s. They're just presenting it for the new Marvel audience, but it's funny, Jack Kirby drawing it over again. I mean, it'd be interesting to compare it to the original Golden Age version, but maybe we'll do that in another episode. Daredevil, again, talking about the differences of characters. Here's a whole different type of character. This one is introduced here, created by Stan Lee and Bill Everett. Bill Everett being the original creator of the Submariner in 1939, I think. 39 in the old Marvel comics. But they brought Bill back to work on a new character with Stan, Daredevil. What they call like a street level hero, right? He doesn't have superpower. Well, he doesn't have super strength, but he does have enhanced senses: hearing, smell, taste, and touch. He's blind, of course. He's blinded by some accident. But it's very different. Yeah, it's got a crime feel to it, crime story feel. There's like crooked boxing promoters, and young Matt Murdock's father is expected to take a dive. Sinister gangster guy. So very different. Again, very different. It's no gods. It's no cosmic radiation or giant monsters. It's just this super enhanced street vigilante, and the original costumes, that famous red and yellow. I've always liked that. I mean, it's loud, but why not? The guy's called Daredevil, right? And they've changed it in a few issues. I don't think the very next issue, but pretty quickly. And the familiar all red costume. But yeah, again, it's another one of those very unique, different characters coming out from the same company, the same writer and artists at the time. We moved to, so now I told you Sgt Fury was a World War II character. Well, they decided to bring him back right in the mid-60s, right when the Bond films were hitting big, as a secret agent, Nick Fury, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., the supreme headquarters of the International Espionage Law Enforcement Division. So yeah, at this time, there's this group called Hydra, evil, sinister organization with world domination as their goal. So the Western powers, they come up with S.H.I.E.L.D., a counter agency to take out Hydra. And they need a leader, so they figure they get this old war veteran, Nick Fury. There's Tony Stark. I guess he's a big financer behind S.H.I.E.L.D. and a weapons provider. So yeah, Nick Fury is introduced. There's a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. That's a crazy Kirby invention. Instead of a, what do you call those things on the ocean? Oh boy. you know, the ones on the ocean with the planes and everything. Well, he puts rotor blades on it, and now it's a giant floating sky helicarrier. And the last character in this book is very cosmic, the Silver Surfer, who was introduced in an earlier run on Fantastic Four, I think about issue 48, right? The famous 48, 49, 50, the Galactus trilogy, when Galactus first shows up. Well, Jack Kirby introduced this flying metallic character on a surfboard, the Silver Surfer. So by the late, I forgot the year of this, maybe late 60s, Stan decided to do a Silver Surfer comic with artist John Buscema, which apparently didn't make Kirby too happy. But I read these as a kid. These were reprinted in, I think, something called Fantasy Masterpieces. So I read the whole, they reprinted the whole run. I think it was 18 issues or so. But yeah, this is very, you know, the art's beautiful. The character's a little different than the way he was portrayed in the original appearance, which again, I think caused some unhappiness on Kirby's part. But as a kid, I really liked this version of it. You know, Stan was really doing his highfalutin, poetic type of writing at this point with this character. People will complain about the character, though, at least in retrospect, that he was always whining too much and such. There's a little bit of that. But, you know, Stan uses it as a vehicle to ponder on the inhumanity of mankind and, you know, destroying the environment and just all this evilness in the world. And the Surfer would often comment on that. But I don't know. I thought the stories at the time as a kid, the art was fantastic. Having a great guy like John Buscema illustrate this. The beautiful Shala Ball, Nora and Rad's lover, who he had to leave. He had to Galactus was going to destroy this planet, Zenla. So Nora and Rad, to save his planet, I guess he agreed to become the Galactus's herald. So Galactus was going to devour the planet, and Nora and Rad to sacrifice his planet, which is kind of odd because he agrees to become his herald, which means he has to go look for planets for Galactus to consume and devour. So is it good to save your own planet, but you, you know, you kind of signed a death warrant for I don't know how many planets he ended up finding for Galactus, but and then it ties in with the storyline in the Fantastic Four when he first appeared. But anyway, that's the last one, and of course Stan has an afterword. But that is Fantastic First. You know, a great look at that early, you know, the early Marvel Age of Comics throughout the 60s. Again, these are such amazing characters. They're still around somewhat. What is it? 50 years now? No, it's more than 50. 60, 70? Maybe 80? I'm not sure. Do the math on that, somebody. But yeah, the characters have stood the test of time, obviously. I mean, you just look at any of these. Most of you know these, and most of them, yeah, I think all these characters, I'm looking at them now. Yeah, every one of them has been in a movie, if not a movie series, or several movie series. Which is not to say that's not how you judge a comic book character by, you know, if they became a movie or not. But the fact that the characters are still in print, you know, continuously, multiple stories, multiple series every year, and animation and video games and movies and toys and merchandising. Yeah, they were just cranking these things out. They didn't know what they were doing, I guess, at the time, other than just working on a monthly comic, getting their paycheck, trying to do some good stories, but stood the test of time, thankfully. Anyway, I wanted to share this book with you, Fantastic First. I've been wanting to share this on the show for a while. Really quick, let me do a quick commercial plug. I've got an Indiegogo campaign, a crowdfunding campaign. The link is down below here in the video. This is a comic I did in 2017, Saints and Sinners, collecting a couple of stories of some of my more eclectic characters. So I'm doing a new version of this. It won't be as big. This is 9x12. It'll be more like 8.5x10, which is still pretty big. It's magazine size. And it'll have a new cover. This will be the cover image. And I'm adding like 4 more pages to the thing. But you can check out the link down below. I did a video on this, the previous episode to the one you're looking at right now. Also the videos in the Indiegogo campaign. So check that out, please. You can support my comics works that way, and also see the comics that, you know, some of these inspired me to do my work. So check that out. Okay, thanks everybody.